The clocks are the first things they took from me, or rather, the first things they allowed to die. In a house this large, silence isn't just the absence of noise, it is a weight, a heavy, suffocating blanket that settles into the corners of the room. For 50 years, my life was measured in the steady, rhythmic heartbeat of pendulums and the delicate, silvery chime of quarter-hour strikes. I was a master antique horologist. I knew the intimate language of gears, the tension of mainsprings, and the precise, microscopic dance of pinions. I could tell you the health of a timepiece just by the way the air vibrated around it. Now, at 83, the only heartbeat I have left to measure is the one purring against my ankles, and my own, which seems to be ticking down toward a midnight I was never supposed to see. I am Arthur Sterling, and I'm becoming a ghost in the very house I built with the sweat of my youth and the precision of my hands. My daughter, Claire, and her husband Victor have been here for 6 months. They arrived after my spell in the garden. A moment of lightheadedness they successfully campaigned into a diagnosis of advanced cognitive decline. They told the neighbors they were moving in out of the goodness of their hearts. But I see the way they look at the world I've collected. I see Victor's eyes linger on my Ming vases, calculating the auction value before the dust even settles on them. I see Claire touching my Patek Philippe collection with fingers that don't care about the history, only the gold content. They look at me like a rot that needs to be cleared away so they can enjoy the harvest of a life they didn't earn. The door to my bedroom opened. I didn't need to turn my head to know who it was. The floorboards near the threshold have a specific, sharp groan when someone Claire's weight steps on them. "It's time for your vitamins, Dad," Claire said. Her voice was a sharp, artificial chime, the kind of tone you use with a toddler or a very old dog. She stood in the doorway, the harsh light from the hallway casting a long, predatory shadow across my Persian rug. She was holding a small plastic cup and a glass of water that looked cloudy in the dim light. She wore a smile that never reached her eyes. It stopped at her teeth, cold, white, and perfectly rehearsed. "I'm not a child, Claire," I said. My voice sounded raspy, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. I haven't used it much lately. I know when I'm being managed.
"I don't need the blue pill tonight. It makes my head feel like it's filled with wet wool. I can't think when I take it, and I need to think." The doctor said, "Your agitation is increasing, Dad," she countered, stepping into the room without an invitation. She walked with a practiced air of authority, the kind that people use when they've already decided you no longer have a say in your own existence. "Victor and I are just worried about you. You're becoming forgetful. You forgot to turn off the stove yesterday. We can't have you burning the house down with all of us inside, can't we?" "You know as well as I do that I didn't forget that stove," I said, looking her directly in those cold gray eyes. "I was in the library. I heard the click of the dial. I saw Victor through the reflection of the silver tray on the sideboard. I saw him turn it on and then walk away. And then, 10 minutes later, he's calling the fire department, claiming he smelled gas. It was a performance, Claire, a paper trail of my incompetence." She didn't even flinch. She just held the cup closer to my face. "You're imagining things again, Dad. That's exactly what the medication is for. The paranoia, the delusions. It's for your own safety. Victor loves you. We both do. Now take the pill. Don't make me call him in here to help you." The threat was silent but heavy. Victor was a large man, a man who enjoyed the physical dominance he now held over me. I looked at the blue pill. It sat in the bottom of the plastic cup like a tiny, venomous bead. I realized in that moment that the daughter I had raised on bedtime stories and velvet ribbons, the little girl I had once held on my shoulders to see the stars, had been replaced by a stranger who viewed my life as nothing more than a ledger of debts she was eager to settle. If you are listening to this, and you believe that the children you sacrificed your youth for will be there to catch you when you fall, if you think blood is a shield against the cruelty of the world, then pray that they aren't the ones who tripped you. I wish someone had warned me that greed is a slow-acting poison, and it starts with the people who share your last name. It starts with a whisper, and ends with a locked door. "Fine," I said. "Give it to me." I took the cup from her, my fingers brushing against hers. Her skin was cold. I brought the cup to my lips. But I used the watchmaker's trick, the manual dexterity that 50 years of working with hairsprings had granted me.
I palmed the pill between my thumb and forefinger, tucked it into the fold of my palm, and tipped the water back. I made a show of swallowing, my throat bobbing with the effort. Claire watched me with clinical intensity. She waited for a few seconds, then nodded, satisfied. "Good," she said, taking the empty cup back. "Now try to get some sleep. Victor will be up to check on you later. We have a big day tomorrow. The lawyers are coming by to finalize some things." "Finalize what?" I asked. "Just the details," she said, already turning toward the door. "Your care plan, making sure everything is in order. Don't worry about it. Just rest." She stepped out, and I heard the unmistakable sound of the lock clicking from the outside. That was her new rule, for my safety. I sat there in the dark, the blue pill still pressed against my palm. I felt Mittens jump up onto the bed, her three-legged gait slightly uneven but determined. She was a scruffy calico I had rescued from a rain-slicked gutter 10 years ago. She was the only thing in this house that didn't want my signature on a deed. She didn't care about the Ming vases or the stocks. She only cared about the warmth of my lap and the sound of my voice. I reached into my pocket and felt the crinkle of paper. It was a brochure I had fished out of the trash in the kitchen earlier that morning, when Victor thought I was napping. It was for a place called The Gables. I didn't need to read the fine print to know what it was. A state-run warehouse for the forgotten. A facility where the air smells of bleach and the residents are just numbers on a chart. In the margin, in Victor's cramped, ugly handwriting, were the words, "Check liquidation value of estate by October." They weren't waiting for me to die. They were planning my disappearance. They were going to pack me away like an old clock that no longer kept time, leaving them to strip the gears of my life for parts. I sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me, until I felt like I was being crushed. I looked at the photograph of Martha on my nightstand. She was smiling, her hair caught in a breeze from a summer long ago. I had promised her on her deathbed that I would keep this house in the family, that I would protect the history we had built together. But James and Claire weren't family anymore. They were scavengers picking at the bones of my legacy. I needed an ally.
I needed someone they couldn't buy, someone whose soul hadn't been corroded by the thought of my bank account. I thought of Julian, Dr. Julian Vance. He was the vet who had been treating Mittens since she was a kitten. He was young, soft-spoken, and he always looked at me with a quiet respect that I had forgotten existed. He was the only outsider allowed in the house now, mostly because Isabella insisted on Mittens' health being monitored, likely so the cat wouldn't die and leave a mess for the cleaning crew they intended to hire. I reached under my mattress, my fingers searching the dark until they found the small plastic shape of the burner phone. I had paid the grocery delivery boy $50 to buy it for me last week. It was my only tether to the world beyond these locked doors. I dialed Julian's number. My hands were shaking, the adrenaline fighting against the exhaustion of my age. "Arthur?" Julian's voice was warm, surprised. "Is everything okay? It's late." "Julian," I whispered, my eyes fixed on the door, listening for the sound of Victor's footsteps. "It's Arthur Sterling. I don't have much time, and I need you to listen. I'm being held in my own home. They're drugging me. They're planning to put me away and sell everything Martha and I built." "Arthur, slow down," Julian said, his voice dropping an octave. "Are you sure? That's a very serious accusation." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said. "I'm a watchmaker, Julian. I know how to see the cracks. I've heard them talking. I found the brochures. I need you to do something for me, something legal, something that will make them scream. I need to change the trust, Julian. I need to change it tonight." "I can't do that over the phone, Arthur. I'm a vet, not a lawyer. Your father was a lawyer, Julian. You told me once you still had his contacts, his forms. You know the law better than most. I need you to bring me a specific set of documents when you come to see Mittens tomorrow. I'll sign them. I'll have them witnessed. I'm leaving it all to the only one who doesn't want it." "The cat?" Julian asked, a hint of disbelief in his voice. "The cat," I confirmed. "Mittens will be the primary beneficiary of the Sterling estate. You'll be the trustee. Every cent, every vase, every watch will be used for animal welfare. They won't get a single gear. Arthur, they'll fight this. They'll claim you're not of sound mind. Let them try," I said. "I'm documenting everything. I've hidden a recorder in the vent." "I'm saving the pills. When this goes to court, I won't be the one on trial." The floorboard groaned outside. "I have to go," I whispered. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Don't let them suspect anything." I ended the call and shoved the phone back under the mattress just as the lock clicked. I squeezed my eyes shut, letting my body go limp, feigning the heavy, artificial sleep of the drugged man they wanted me to be. The door opened. The scent of Victor's expensive cigars drifted into the room. I felt the mattress dip as he leaned over me. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, his breathing heavy and rhythmic. It was a cold, clinical appraisal. He was looking at me the way a man looks at a broken appliance he's finally decided to throw out. He saw the age, the frailty, the easy target. He didn't see the watchmaker. He didn't see the man who had spent a lifetime understanding that the smallest gear can stop the largest machine if it's placed correctly. He stood there for what felt like an hour, though the clock in my mind told me it was only 3 minutes. Finally, he turned and walked out, the lock clicking once more with a finality that sent a shiver through my bones. I waited until I heard his footsteps fade down the stairs, and then I heard the muffled clink of glass from the kitchen. They were celebrating. They were drinking my Bordeaux and toasting to a future that didn't include me. I opened my eyes and looked at Mittens. She was sitting at the foot of the bed, her yellow eyes glowing in the darkness, steady and ancient. She tilted her head, watching me with an intelligence that seemed far beyond her species. "Don't worry, girl," I whispered. "They think you're just a cat. They think you're a nuisance they can tolerate until I'm gone. They don't know you're about to become the most powerful woman in this city. They think they've stopped the clock, Mittens, but they've forgotten one thing about time." I reached out and touched the small wooden clock on my nightstand, the only one they hadn't allowed to wind down. "It always keeps moving," I said, the words a silent promise to the dark. "And for Claire and Victor, the alarm is about to go off." I lay back against the pillows, the silence of the room no longer feeling like a weight, but like a weapon. I was Arthur Sterling, and I was going to make sure that the final chime of this house was the one that set me free.
Mittens stretched, her claws kneading the blanket, her eyes never leaving mine as the shadows in the room deepened into the blue of the coming dawn. "I will see you tomorrow, Julian," I thought, and the gears of my life finally began to turn against the hands that tried to break them. The morning light began to bleed through the curtains, cold and indifferent, but I was ready for the day. I had 24 hours to reclaim my life, and I wouldn't waste a single second. The wait was over. The watch was wound. I spent my life fixing time, but I never realized my own blood was trying to run the clock out on me. I spent 50 years listening to the mechanical heartbeats of clocks, understanding every tooth of every gear, yet I was deaf to the hollow sound of my own daughter's laughter as she planned my end. The great hall of Sterling Manor was cold, a bone-deep chill that no amount of seasoned oak in the fireplace could truly touch. The flames roared in the hearth, throwing long, flickering shadows across the limestone walls I had built with my own sweat 40 years ago, but the heat stayed confined to the stone. It didn't reach me. I sat in my high-backed chair, the one that used to belong at the head of the table, but tonight I had been moved. I was sitting to the side, a spectator at my own wake. The table was set with Martha's fine bone china, the delicate gold rims gleaming under the crystal chandelier, and the heavy silver cutlery that had taken me 10 years of painstaking restoration work to afford. Every piece of silver in this room represented a month of my life, 1,000 hours of squinting through a loupe, yet Claire and Victor treated them like common kitchenware. Victor was sitting in my chair at the head of the table. He held the carving knife with a detached, clinical precision, slicing through the roast lamb as if he were dissecting a problem he was eager to be rid of. He didn't look at me. He looked at the meat, then at his wine, then at the grandfather clock in the corner, the one he had likely already appraised for a quick sale. Claire sat opposite him, her dress a shimmering silk that screamed of old money she hadn't earned a single cent of. She smiled at me, but it was the kind of smile you give a ghost, polite, terrified, and waiting for it to vanish. "Dad, you've hardly touched your wine," Victor said, gesturing toward my glass with the tip of the carving knife. "It's your 84th birthday. Relax."
We have a lot to be thankful for tonight. A milestone like this deserves a toast, don't you think?
I looked at the dark red liquid in the crystal glass. For 6 months, I had been drinking what they gave me, feeling the wool settle over my brain, feeling my memories slip away like sand through an hourglass. But for the last 3 days, the wine had stayed untouched, and the pills Claire gave me had been tucked into the lining of my chair. "I am thankful," I said. My voice was steady, the raspy tremor gone. It sounded like the voice of the man who once commanded a workshop of 20 men. "I'm thankful for clarity, Victor. It's a rare gift at my age, and one I've recently rediscovered." Claire laughed, a hollow, tinkling sound that grated against my nerves like a metal file on a brass gear. She reached out and patted my hand, her fingers cold and dry. "Oh, Dad, you and your riddles, always the philosopher. We have a surprise for you, actually. After we finish this lovely dinner, we're going to look at some papers in the library. Just some minor updates to the estate. We want to make sure you're taken care of, especially since your memory has been so spotty lately. We've spoken to the lawyers, and they agree that a structured care plan is the only way to ensure your comfort." I glanced to my right. Dr. Julian Vance sat there, quiet and observant. Claire had only allowed him to attend because I had spent the last week feigning a total mental collapse over Mitten's health. I had wept and raved until she finally agreed to let the vet join us for dinner just to shut me up. She viewed Julian as a glorified technician, someone who dealt with feline kidney function and nothing more. She had no idea that Julian was the son of my best friend, the man who had taught me that a well-placed legal clause is more powerful than any mainspring. Julian wasn't just here to check on a cat. He was the architect of the reality they were about to walk into. "Is the memory that spotty, Claire?" I asked, taking a small bite of the lamb. "I seem to remember the exact day you were born. I remember the red ribbon you wore in your hair. And I remember the way Victor looked the day he asked for a loan to cover his first failed business venture. Some things are etched quite deeply into the brass, wouldn't you say?" Claire's smile faltered, the corners of her mouth twitching. The mask was beginning to slip, revealing the panicked, greedy bird beneath the silk.
Victor cleared his throat, the knife scraping harshly against the china plate. "Dad, let's not get bogged down in the past. Tonight is about the future, your future. The facility we found for you, the Gables, it's top of the line. They specialize in cases like yours. Paranoia, agitation, the whole spectrum. It's for the best." I looked at Julian. He gave me a microscopic nod, his hand resting on the medical bag he had kept tucked under his chair. For 3 weeks, while I played the part of the senile, wandering fool, I had been a spy in my own home. The cameras Julian had helped me hide behind the antique clocks had seen it all. They saw Claire dumping my heart medication into the potted plants. They saw Victor practicing my signature on stock transfer forms. They heard the late-night conversations where they laughed about how easy it was to break a man who was already half gone. "I have a surprise, too," I said. I set my fork down. The sharp clink of silver against porcelain echoed through the great hall like a gavel strike in a silent courtroom. Victor stopped chewing. Claire's glass stopped halfway to her lips. The fire in the hearth hissed, a pocket of sap popping with the sound of a small explosion. "A surprise?" Claire asked, her voice pitching higher. "Dad, you shouldn't have bothered. You aren't... Well, you should be resting, not worrying about surprises." "I've never been better," I announced. I pushed my chair back and stood up. My legs were thin, my back was bent from 80 years of gravity, but in that moment, I felt like a skyscraper. I felt the strength of the foundation I had poured. I looked at Victor, who sat in my chair, and I saw him for exactly what he was, a tenant who had overstayed his welcome. "Julian," I said, "would you do the honors?" Julian didn't hesitate. He didn't reach for a stethoscope or a bottle of feline antibiotics. He reached into his bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He moved with a calm, practiced, deliberate speed, sliding a document with a heavy gold seal across the table toward Victor. "What the hell is this?" Victor demanded. He dropped the carving knife. It clattered onto the table, staining the white linen with grease. "Julian, what are you doing? This is a private family dinner. Who do you think you are?" "As of 4 o'clock this afternoon," Julian said, his voice as cool and professional as a high court judge, "Arthur Sterling has executed a new last will and testament, as well as a revocable living trust.
He has also formally rescinded the power of attorney previously granted to Claire Sterling. This document is a notice of revocation, served and filed with the county.
Claire's face turned a violent, sickly shade of gray. She lunged for the paper, but Julian kept his hand on it. "You can't do that," Claire shrieked, her voice cracking with a raw, ugly desperation. "He's incompetent. We have the papers. Dr. Aris signed the evaluation. He's senile. He's hallucinating. James, tell him." Victor stood up, his face turning a dark, bruised purple. "Julian, you're out of your mind. You're a vet. You don't know the first thing about estate law. This won't hold up for 10 seconds in court. We'll have you sued for elder abuse and interference." Julian didn't flinch. He pulled a second document from the envelope and slid it toward them. "Dr. Aris is currently being interviewed by the medical board," Julian continued, his voice never rising. "We have video evidence, Victor. High-definition footage of you meeting him in the parking lot of the country club last month. We have the audio of the bribe you paid him to falsify Arthur's cognitive assessment. And we have the toxicology report from Arthur's blood work, taken secretly last Tuesday. He hasn't been taking the sedatives you've been crushing into his food, Claire. He's been saving them. We have 3 months' worth of evidence of unprescribed drugging and medical neglect." I watched them. It was like watching a grand, historic building collapse in slow motion. The arrogance drained out of Victor, his shoulders slumping as the raw, naked terror took hold. Claire began to hyperventilate, her hand clutching the pearls I had bought her for her college graduation, pearls she was probably already planning to sell. "Is this what you wanted, Claire?" I asked softly. "To see me in a room with white walls and a locked door? To trade your father for a collection of vases and a few bank accounts?" "Dad, please," Claire sobbed, the tears finally real, though they were tears of defeat, not remorse. We were stressed. We didn't know how to handle it." "You handled it by trying to erase me," I said. "You didn't want a father. You wanted a windfall." "So who gets the money?" Victor hissed. He was cornered, his eyes darting around the great hall as if he could find a way to rip the gold from the ceiling before he was kicked out. "If not us, who? You're leaving it to a charity? Some museum for old clocks?"
"You'd let the sterling name die just to spite us. I'm leaving it to the only soul in this house who didn't try to kill me," I said. I reached down. Mittens was sitting by my feet, her yellow eyes watching the room with a calm, predatory intelligence. I picked her up, her scruffy fur warm against my chest. She purred, the sound a low, steady vibration that felt more honest than anything I had heard in this house for years. "The cat?" Claire shrieks, her voice reaching a frequency that made the crystal glasses on the table vibrate. "You're leaving $80 million to a cat? You've lost your mind. This proves it. No judge will ever allow this." "The Sterling Animal Welfare Trust," Julian clarified, his voice cutting through her hysteria. "Mittens is the primary beneficiary. The estate will provide for her care, the maintenance of this manor as a sanctuary, and the funding for every stray rescue in this county for the next century. Dr. Vance, myself, has been appointed as the sole trustee with absolute authority over the property and assets. The paperwork is ironclad, Victor. It was drafted by my father's firm. You can spend the next 20 years trying to fight it, but you'll do it from a prison cell for elder abuse and forgery." Victor roared, a sound of pure animalistic rage, and lunged across the table toward me. He reached for my throat, his face a mask of greed turned into violence. Julian was faster. He stepped between us, his jaw set, his larger frame blocking Victor's path. "The police are in the driveway, Victor," Julian said. "I called them 5 minutes ago. We have the footage of the forgery. We have the footage of you turning on the stove. We have everything. You have 10 minutes to pack your personal belongings. Anything that belongs to the Sterling estate stays here. The house is now property of the trust. You are trespassers." I stood there, holding Mittens, and watched as the 2 officers entered the hall. They didn't need to use force. The sight of the uniforms was enough to break what was left of Victor's spirit. He slumped against the table, his head in his hands. Claire was hysterical now, screaming that she was my daughter, that she loved me, that I couldn't do this to my own flesh and blood. I didn't feel anger as they were escorted out. I didn't feel the sting of the betrayal anymore. That wound had already scarred over. I felt only a profound, heavy silence returning to the manor. A clean silence. I watched through the window as the patrol cars pulled away, the red and blue lights reflecting off the dark glass of the library. I walked to the fireplace.
I picked up the small, silver-framed photo of Martha that sat on the mantel. She looked young, her eyes filled with the same light I felt returning to mine. "I kept the house, Martha," I whispered. "I kept the heart beating. It's full of life again." I sat back in my chair, the one at the side of the table. I didn't want the head of the table anymore. That chair was for men who wanted to rule. I just wanted to live. Julian sat across from me, pouring 2 glasses of water. Mittens jumped up onto the table, sniffing at the cold roast lamb before curling up right on top of the pile of legal documents Claire had wanted me to sign. The grandfather clock in the corner, a piece I had built with my own hands for our 20th anniversary, began to chime. It was 8 o'clock. The deep, resonant tones filled the hall, vibrating through the floorboards and into my bones. It was perfectly in sync, not a second off.